Okay, good evening. Thank you all for coming. My name is David. I'm a partner at Forward Partners. These events, Forward Partners Live, we run every month. We invite members of the startup community to come and spend some time listening to an expert on a topic we hope is of interest and of use. And the next event will be in 5 weeks' time. I'll tell you about that at the end. Our guest speaker tonight, Ian, I will introduce in a moment. But before we do that, I'd just like to give you a little bit of background as to where we think tonight's topic fits. For those of you who know us, you are probably, For those of you that know us, you're probably aware that as an investor, we're quite unique in that we have a combination of hands-on help from our team, as well as investment. So there are some very, very early stage companies that we've backed. And when I mean early stage, I mean very early stage, even as far as one founder, one idea with one sheet of Excel. And the team at Forward Partners help our entrepreneurs build out their businesses, understand their business model, research their customer base, and achieve product market fit. They spend that time in our offices and sharing our office space with us. And of course, one of the big challenges for any company is once you've got a product is marketing. How do you get your first customers? How do you get your first customers to buy from you? Which channels work? How do you reach them in a cost-effective way? And our team help our entrepreneurs explore those different methods. And the way we think about it is really around these three areas. There are different types of media that you can engage with your customers. There's paid media, owned media, and earned media. And just to explain what that means, paid media is fairly self-explanatory. Advertising you pay for. A lot of online marketing these days is in the paid section. Owned media is things like your own website, your own app, your own emails, your own marketing that you do within your own controlled environment that you don't pay somebody else for but still costs you money. And the best stuff is the earned media. This is where people are talking about your business and you're not paying them to do so. Of course, that is the holy grail. It's the lowest cost of acquiring customers. And the different types of channels we would help our startups to explore are listed on the screen here. Different companies would find different channels work best for them. If you look on the paid side, a good example of a paid channel, of course, is Google AdWords. And with PPC, it can be a very effective way just to get some early customers to a landing page to test a proposition. But then, on the paid side as well, there are social channels. Custom audiences on Facebook are a great way to test out a proposition by targeting a very specific segment of customers. And you can see some examples there of earned media. And earned media is media coverage, people talking about you in the media, comments on blogs, retweets, likes and shares. But to get those, you need something for them to share. You need something for them to talk about. And that's where content sits across all of these. Now, you spend time creating content and you can get it out into the world, but if nobody reads it, nobody shares it, if it's not engaging, if it's not interesting, it can be a complete waste of time. And so that's the big fear about content marketing is you spend all this time writing a blog, writing an article, doing a white paper, and then it goes nowhere. And that can be a huge waste of time and energy when you could have been doing something else. You can, of course, and the reason I put it in the middle is you can, of course, seed some of that interest through paid channels. You can do sponsored tweets to get people to download your white paper, for example. So content really does sit in the middle there. And that's where we see content as a potentially very strong strategy for some startups. It won't work for all startups, and it will be a strategy that has its time and place within the journey of a startup. What will be interesting for us to discuss tonight, therefore, is what kind of content strategies actually work, for what type of companies, and what kind of tactics could you actually employ on your business. So I'd like to introduce our speaker, Ian. Ian describes himself as, I can help you explain anything to anyone. which is it's a great tagline. And he's got a workshop for copywriting and storytelling called Rockstar Copy. He's about to publish a book called Content Empire, and he currently works as a director at Gatehouse Communications, which is an internal communications agency. And so he spends his life living and breathing, communicating to other people. He's got some great stories to tell. So without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Ian. Just like to say as well, during the session, we'd like to make it interactive. If you've got questions for Ian, we'd love to hear them. Emma at the back here has got a microphone, and the reason for that is twofold. One, so that you can hear what somebody's asking, but also we're recording this session so other people can view it afterwards. So if you have questions, just wave your hand and we'll try and get Emma to pass you the mic, and we'll do that. So we need to wire your laptop in, Ian?
Yeah, I'll get this set up. Yeah. So basically, what it means by interactive is if you see me dying, someone else start talking and ask a question. That's why we made it interactive. What David said about creating content and it not really going anywhere. I mean, that's definitely happened to me. Has it happened to anyone else? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what happens when you try and what does that feel like when you put all that work in and you get nothing back?
Do you know that you're doing something good in the sense that you are providing some value to certain people? It's just the scalability of the content. So you might have huge expectations as to what that content should be achieving, but in the general sense of understanding SEO and the opportunities around that, you're contributing anyway because you're building something that's supposed to have some value for some users. So if you do your research, you do good content. It's just about the scalability and the impact of it that could be very frustrating.
Yeah. Like you have a message you want to get out there to the world, and no one is listening. There's the field of content marketing there's a lot written on it. It reminds me of in the 60s during the space race, NASA had a problem. They found out that in zero gravity environments, astronauts couldn't write in space because the pens, the ink wouldn't flow. So they hired this guy called Paul Fisher. Has anyone seen the space pen? They paid him $2 million to create this. It took 6 months, and they spent $2 or $3 million, and they finally had a pen that would write in space. And the Russians at the same time had the same problem as well. So they used a pencil, and I love this story because it shows how people often create over-elaborate solutions to very simple problems. Does that kind of resonate with people? Yeah. And if you Google content marketing plan, I know I'm skipping around here. If you Google content marketing plan, this is what you find. And I kind of found something similar to this when I was starting my blog. And at the time I was starting it, I knew that I wanted to create a blog in the internal communication field, just because I knew that was a market that was kind of quite underserved with good content. It was already boring. But the problem I had was I had a full-time job doing something completely different. I worked in the online casino industry. I wanted to give something back to society. And I just had 2 twins, 2 young girls. So I had no time, I had a full-time job, I had no money to spend on this stuff. So I really needed to create some content strategies that didn't require me to constantly, create content and blog and spend all that time. I think for a lot of us, we get kind of overwhelmed, anyone kind of get overwhelmed by all the stuff they should be doing? Yeah. There's a guy called Clyde Beatty. In the 1930s, he was a celebrity lion tamer. They had those; they didn't have X Factor back then. And he would get into the arena, get into the cage with these lions and tigers, and he would wow the audiences by fending off these beasts. And there'd be hyenas and bears and stuff, and he was really famous. And people thought it was the whip, or it was the gun, the pistol that he carried that kept these bears and stuff back. But actually, it was the chair that he carried, and people didn't realize that. And the reason why a chair would keep the lion at bay is because when a lion sees a chair, all it can do is focus on the four legs, and it just gets baffled. And because it has so many options, it doesn't know what to swipe at. It doesn't do nothing, it freezes. And I like that story because it's just like us creating content. I mean, if you look at my phone, everything has like a red blob on it with like a number that tells me something I've not done, like a channel I've ignored. And that's the thing, there's so much, like, anyone feel guilty, you know, when they think of their content marketing? I do, like, there's so much stuff you could be, there's like all the guilt, all the got-tos that you should be doing. You know, you should be updating Twitter, figuring out Instagram, you know, pinning to Pinterest, being active on Google+. Every channel is like a hungry mouth waiting to be fed. And if you plan carefully, and if you stay like really, really motivated, and there are courses you can take that will actually keep you motivated, you know, then you can just about manage it for like a while to keep up with all this stuff. But all these spinning plates, they do eventually fall. And if you look in my hosting account, I've got like 60 domain names or something from like failed projects. Has anyone got like a list of failed projects? Yeah. I was going to start like a nightclub for kids. It was called. I was going to start like a restaurant that only served like Wagyu beef like once every. It's like called Secret Steakhouse, and I was going to start. I had another thing. I had so many failed projects, and looking back at them, some of them are pretty good ideas. If I could have just kept up the pace, you know, then maybe they would have been successful. But this is one I did manage to stick at, and the reason why is because I realized that I needed to build things that would stand the test of time, instead of like constantly doing another blog post that was just get thrown on the pile and, oh, it's another blog post, you know. I needed to kind of create some leverage, stuff that I could create once and kind of constantly have, it would constantly send traffic to me. So what I'm going to do in this session is kind of just show you some of the tactics that I've kind of come up with that do that for me. And I'm a bit worried because like my world is B2B, business to business. So we are a company called Gatehouse, and we sell like internal communication solutions to big clients, and they pay a lot of money for them. So for us, the customer's worth a lot of money. But I know some of you are maybe in the B2C space, and also some of you like a customer's not worth that much money. So hopefully there's some stuff you can take out of this. Like what one guy was saying, who was it? He was saying like sometimes you just get like one piece of the puzzle from a talk, and then later on you might get the other piece of the puzzle. So I hope there's lots of things you can take away from it. This is an example of like what I think is bad content marketing. There's a spread betting company called ETX Capital. That was another one of my businesses, making videos for spread betting companies. They create a video every day and upload it to YouTube that says what the market is doing, like, you know, what's up, what's down. And I don't know how long it takes them to make this, but almost as soon as they create it, it's out of date. You know, it's like almost the opposite of what we're going to talk about here. Your aim is to kind of create stuff that just, you do it once and then that's that. Just a bit about me. Like, I go to some, it's funny, David and I were talking about like the kind of celebrity that creating content brings you. And like, I'm not like a famous or by any means or anything like that, but within a small, like there's a small group of people like who work in internal communications who know me very well, and I go to events and they say, see Ian Harris, and they go, oh, Ian Harris, like, oh, I'll get your emails. Or they'll joke, they'll go, oh, the famous Ian Harris. And it's because everyone in that room has kind of got my email. They get my weekly email. And that's by design, because every piece of content that I put out, the only purpose of it really is just to get their email address so I can get them in an email marketing sequence. And so I'll finish up by talking about that. I'll tell you how I reach people, and then I'll tell you what I send them. So before we talk about content marketing, let's just go back in time a second. In in 1948, there was a journalist called Charles Engel, and he figured out something that it took me, like I worked in journalism for 10 years. He figured out there was no money in journalism back in 1948. And he was never going to get rich working in newspapers. So he became the marketing manager of a small like investment firm, I guess you'd call it. And he got there and he was in charge of like marketing this investment firm. And he decided to apply his journalism background to marketing stocks and shares. And he thought maybe we should just take out an advert in a newspaper that just explains how stock markets work, you know, how the bond business works. Just answer everybody's questions. And his bosses were quite skeptical. They were like, well, this advert's like 6,000 words long, and no one's going to read it. You know, everyone's just going to skip straight to the sports pages. But they let him test it. At the end of the advert, there was like a tiny, tiny call to action, which says like, if you'd like some more information, please write to us. And that was it. Like today, you'd have a huge button and a picture of a girl in a bikini pointing to like a form, you know. And this was back in 1948. They had to like fill in a coupon and fill it in. So nobody expected it to work, but in fact, they got like the ad generated 5,000 leads in its first week. So it was a huge response, and it turned this little firm called Merrill Lynch into one of the biggest names in the world of finance today. So it was all built in on content marketing. Now, the problem, anyone seen this quote before? You know, if you just build a better product, if you build a great product, people will hear about it. Well, back then, there weren't a lot of mousetraps and there weren't a lot of doors. Nowadays, everything's kind of so crowded, we have to stand out. So let me just skip straight to the content. You know this is an important slide because it's got a logo on it, and it's got some transitions. So there are so many kind of tactics that you can do. I'm not suggesting you do all of these, but these are the ones I'm going to talk about today. So everything, basically I put out bits of content and everything gets them into an email list. Because if you think of someone going to your blog or like following you on Twitter, it's nowhere near as valuable as having someone's email address. The email inbox is where like the magic happens. It's like where all your personal life and your business, it's where it all comes together. And it's a very like personal space. Everyone's talking about the death of email, but like we carry our inboxes around with us, you know, all the time. And the first thing I do is check my email. So in the morning, and it's amazing how many people have still not cottoned onto this, that the email is still the most powerful channel. Like this is every day, this kind of little empire of content that we've created sends us leads like this. And they're from big like companies like Avon, Adidas, and it's just because we've kind of bribed them into giving us their email address. There is no creature that cannot be lured into a trap with the right bait. So I'm just going to skip ahead, and for me that's like a blog. Like I wake up, when I was really into blogging, I used to wake up every morning and think, oh, it's been 3 days now since I updated my blog. And I realized like I was kind of, I didn't have like my own business. It was almost like I was like a slave to Google. It was almost like I worked for Google, you know. Because this is how blogging is meant to work, right? You write a new post every day, and then maybe after a year, Google will send you some traffic. But you can't ever stop, or else Google will kind of, you know, demote you and ban you. And one of my friends called Marco runs a blog, and he's the most devoted person ever. And then Google changed their algorithm, and now he's on like page 60. And he had everything taken away from him. And the key to a lot of the platforms that I'm going to cover now is that you own them. You know, you're not dependent on like the search engine results for your traffic. So I think I mentioned I spent like 10 years in magazines, and I worked for like magazines like in dance music and tech. And my favorite thing about working in magazines was that I could pick up the phone and ring up anyone I wanted because I was a journalist, and people were like happy to talk to me. I remember once I was working in a drugstore for Mixmag, like police in America were confiscating like Dayglow like necklaces and stuff from ravers because they associated them with drugs. And I got straight through to the Attorney General of Louisiana, and he told me that, you know, gave me a great quote about people being stoned on ecstasy. But I could speak to anyone I wanted just because I was in journalism. But over on the other side of the business, on the ad side, we had all these ad guys selling adverts. And I noticed for them, it was really hard to get people on the phone. Like, it was completely the opposite, you know. So they had, like, these sneaky tricks to catch people. Like, they'd like, ring up right after lunch, because that's when you would be eating a sandwich, and these guys would be, like, the desk slumped. And they could catch them. It's called prime selling time, 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. That's why I learned, anyway. And they'd have these, like, cheesy lines, like, "Mr. Smith, please, it's a business call of a personal nature," to get past all these gatekeepers. So they had all these tricks and tactics, and life was just really hard for them. So when I entered business, I wondered if I could kind of keep this permission I had to talk to everybody, and I could bring that with me, so I could ring people up and, like, they would talk to me. You know, I didn't want to kind of read all these books about cold calling. I didn't want to do that. So the idea I had was I was going to create a trade journal for people in the internal comms world, because that didn't exist. And it would just give me the permission to just ring up anyone I liked, because I could say, "I'm Ian from the Journal of Internal Communication," not like, "I'm Ian, can you buy something from me?" So remember, I'm still working at this point, I've got a full-time job doing copywriting for, like, trying to get people to lose their money in an online casino, and I've got these little girls who are, like, 6 months old, and I've got no time. So I hired a virtual assistant, someone, has anyone done that before? Like, hired a virtual assistant, no? Yeah? It's really good. Like, it can be a big headache. You know, there's a lot of problems. I can talk about that later. But so I hired this guy to kind of go around the industry and just ask people if I could interview them. And every day he'd, like, email me a list of people who I was scheduled to speak to. And I gave him a script to reach out to people. So, you know, he's like, "Hi, you're talking to all these people here today." And what I would do is I'd record the call using a website called CallTrunk. And then I just ask them questions. And basically, interviewing is a really good way to get free content, because if someone talks for 30 minutes or something, that's like 6,000 words of expert content that they've been happy to give you for free. So I get all this transcribed, on a website called rev.com for $1 a minute. So it would cost me like £20 to get an interview transcribed. And then I just edit the transcripts a little bit, and then that will be the content for the magazine. So I called it the Journal of Internal Communication. And I didn't, remember, I'm not like a magazine designer, I'm like a horrible designer. So I put this template, this job on Elance. You all know, anyone used Elance for stuff? Yeah. And I walked around Waterstones to find out, like, what should a trade journal look like. And I found this book, and I sent it to her with some kind of very advanced kind of scamps that I'd done. And she came back with this. And the features of it are that it's like A5 landscape, so it looks very different. It's black and white, so it's very cheap to print. There's no pictures, so I don't have to, like, try and figure out how to make a picture look good on the page. And every page is the same, so I could just do this myself in Apple Pages on the Mac really quickly without having to be a designer. And we started trying to, like, sell it, but I think like 20 people bought it, so that was a complete failure. But then I started giving it away for free in return for leads. So, like, you can get the Journal of Internal Communication free, and you just got to put in your email address, and it worked really well. And what happens is that it costs like £2 to print, something like this, and people come in, and they sign up for it, and then they get an email, and then something pings up in Infusionsoft, the CRM I use, and it says, like, is this person the high value? Are they like someone with a Gmail address, someone with like a Gmail address who's like a student and they don't have their own budget or something? Or are they like, you know, your perfect target? And if they're like someone I want to, you know, I want in my funnel, I tag them and they get the print copy. And if they're like someone I'm not so sure about. They just get the digital copy. So I'm only spending money on people who, are likely to be good prospects. So this is like the first piece of the kind of content marketing jigsaw that I've got. Does anyone think they could maybe do something like this for their business? Anyone sparking? I'm worried like some of you. There's one guy who was like, his business is selling oysters by Boogie Board or something. Who's that? He delivers oysters. Is that right? So I'm not sure how you could do that if that's your business. But basically, the things you can take from this is getting other people to interview. Interviewing other people is a great way to get content. And the thing that will stop you from doing that is the thought that you've got to write it all up yourself. You don't. You can just use a website called rev.com to get it transcribed. So this is a really worthwhile tactic from us. Like if I look down our list of customers, I can see that a lot of them actually came from this. People love being featured in a form of media. It really strokes their ego. And of course, it's a great way to reach out to people who you don't know. The next tactic, so any questions so far on that?
Just on the print subscription, would you still, if you were to do it today, offer a print subscription rather than just give everybody a digital subscription?
I would. It's really difficult to actually communicate that it's a real thing because we've got a photo of it on the website, and people even now they don't understand. Like, I'm like, no, it's a real product, But it just like for the clients we want, I want it on their desk, because it's just a real physical thing. Because a lot of the stuff, they'll just lose it if it's a digital, I think. That's the reason. And people spend there are some keywords on Google that are like £5 a click, and this is costing us like £2 to print. So, and it's going to be on the desk for for God knows how long. So I think print is almost like the forgotten channel. So I would recommend that. The other thing we do a lot of is like ebooks, PDF downloads. The people anyone tried to write an ebook? Anyone tried to write a book? Like I know the thing that stops you is the thought that you've got to write it yourself. Because sometimes you want to sit on it and it's not good enough, and the thought that it's going to be in a book is very kind of off-putting to people. But the thing is, you don't have to write a book yourself. In fact, it's much better if you don't. So we've got this product called Rock Your Comms, and all it is a list of people's tips from around the industry, and it was super, super easy to make, and it's been one of our most popular channels in the one of our most popular ways to get people's email addresses. So what we do is we get people around the industry and we just ask them to contribute. We say, what is the number one secret of whatever? What's the number one secret of your industry? Ask them a relevant question that other people will be interested in, and keep it really simple as well. Don't ask them to write a 300-word, blog post or whatever, because they'll say yes and then they'll never do it. Just get them to provide one sentence, like what's your biggest mistake, or what's your favorite memory, or what advice would you have for someone entering the industry? And this has worked really well for us. Like I have our guy in the Philippines contact people, and he has a script, and people love to be featured in it. He just goes on LinkedIn and finds people who are like the kind of people we want on our email list. So like for us, it's internal communication managers. For you, it could be whoever you're trying to target. And most people agree to be featured. It's really funny. You'd think that people would be like, oh, I've never heard of you, go away. But we have a really positive response from it. And as a side benefit, a lot of these guys actually visit the blog, and about 20% of them sign up for their email list. Because what you can say to them is, give me your email address and I'll let you know when it comes out. So that's a really good way to kind of get build a big email list. And a side benefit of this as well is that it generates several months of free blog content essentially. And it's also generated a lot of links and awareness. These are kind of quite high page rank, high PR links we got in Google. And this is back when I was doing the blog on my own. I tracked the search engine rankings, and I think it went from like 62 to number 6 for the keyword internal comms in a few months. And that was mostly because of we put out this ebook, and everybody had tweeted about it. And I think the total time I spent making it was like, if you add up all the hours, it was like 2 days, because it all happened automatically once I got this guy to go out and get people's tips. Any questions on that? Do you think that could be a good tactic for anyone in like? This is a good tactic for anyone in like B2B, definitely. Anywhere there's like a defined industry, a defined group of people you want to reach, that's a very easy way to create some shareable content. The other big thing that a lot of people miss is like industry research. We published this thing called State of the Sector, and it's a really good way to position yourself as like a thought leader in your industry. We basically reach out to people and say, would you like to take a survey? And if you take the survey, we'll reward you by sending you a copy of the results. And about like 500 people did it. It really built our email list. It generated a lot of media coverage, creates a lot of speaking opportunities. We've been asked to speak about this research. And I think it took us like, if you add up all the time it took, it was maybe like 3 days to produce. So it's super, super easy. And then we have something on our website that we can give away in return for an email address. I don't have too many slides on this one, but another tactic is like, it's a bit of a sneaky tactic, hijacking other people's audiences through webinars. So what you do is you find, you basically run interviews with people in positions of authority, maybe like someone at the Institute of whatever industry you're in. So in our industry, there's like the Institute of Internal Communication. There's always some kind of higher authority, and they're always really, really bad at marketing, so they don't kind of understand what you're trying to do when you interview them. And you do a webinar with them, and you run the registration through your own special opt-in form, and that kind of builds your email address. So I'm kind of talking a lot about just the final tactic, the kind of, it took me a long time to figure this one out. But I kind of identified like I know that's not crack cocaine, but the crack cocaine of content, if you're marketing to people in industry. Jobs are like the methamphetamine of content. They are the sexiest content you can imagine. I found that like in B2B marketplaces, people will fall over themselves to opt themselves to give you their email address to receive like a weekly job alert. Even though it's so easy to find jobs like on LinkedIn and there's about 1 million channels, people just can't get enough of this. So we actually run a jobs website. And the only purpose of us running this jobs website is so people will get this weekly alert. And again, we have a virtual assistant who runs that for us, just finding jobs, putting them on there. It runs off like a little WordPress plugin, and it's so super basic, and it's so like, it's really kind of cheap to run, but we've generated about 2,000 really high quality email addresses through that, just because, and you can also tell when people are about to switch jobs as well, because they sign up for that. And another tactic as well is giving away free training. Like I gave away some free copywriting advice in return for an email address, and that generated quite a lot of stuff. So, was that just a cough? Or I'm going to tell you what happens. Yeah.
So you're capturing your email addresses, but also you're going to make a sale at some point. So what channels have you? Presumably you're measuring the conversion rate from capturing an email to actually making an end sale of whatever your product is. What channels are working best out of the ones that you mentioned for actually doing that?
Well, like I used to believe, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. I used to believe that you should never sell in an email, you know? I was like really kind of hippie about it. I was like, it's just not cool, you know, it's spammy, and don't talk about yourself, talk about them, provide value, provide content. But the only problem was I never sold anything. Everybody loved me. Everybody was like, thank you for the emails. It's so funny, that story about you know, Dave Lee Roth with the M&Ms, like, which I'll tell you in a minute. But I never sold anything. And then I kind of switched it up. I changed it up a little bit, and now I sell in every email. Every email I send has a pitch. But I only do it to subscribers who've been warmed up. So what that means is I have like a warm-up sequence, which is like the best stuff I've ever written. It's like the coolest content. It's the best stories, and it's like the real crowd pleasers. Because I know our audience quite well. It's like they have certain hot button topics that I can talk about that sends them crazy. Like they're all professional communicators, and they hate it when their boss, they're normally female and their boss is normally male, and they hate it when this idiot rewrites all their copy. So if I talk about that, they send it around to all their team, and you know it's very popular. So I have a warm-up sequence that is just about that, and it's like it's very popular. And the other thing, what's the other thing? The hot button topic. Because most of them are female, just like talking about like sexism at work as well. That's quite. I know it sounds quite cynical to push that button, but there was a blogger called James Chartrand, and James is actually a woman, but she tells the story of how she was a freelance writer, and one day she just wasn't getting enough work, and one day she decided to try something. She changed her name to James, and instantly it was like clients were so they didn't haggle the price. There were fewer changes, requests for revisions, all because she was pretending to be a man. And it's, you know, really kind of I've got 3 daughters, so it's a very kind of frightening story, and that resonated really well. So in email, I always find stuff that resonates with my audience. So it's like I'm on their side, you know. The other thing is that some people want to get more email from you, and some people want to get less. So I used to kind of try and guess because you can see the open rates, but now what I do is I have like a higher frequency list where people, if they want to get more emails from me, they can just tell me. So this is one email I did. This is a typical email. It's like, oh, there's a really cool tool you can use. Check it out. It's going to help you. By the way, if you like my emails, click this, and I'll send you like just loads of emails whenever I write them. I won't wait once a week. And I think we got about like 300 people like fill that in, who click that link. And we even get emails like this. So this is someone who's complaining that they didn't receive one of our marketing emails. And that's the position you want to be in. Because remember, it's a bit harder if you're talking to people who are consumers, because their personal inbox is very full with like ASOS and God knows what stuff they get. But people's work email addresses are like pure gold, because most people do not have very interesting lives at work. Their inbox is just full of boring stuff, and like if you can just be a little bit interesting, then you're really kind of onto something. Would it be helpful if I show you how I write these emails, like how I find all these good stories? Because this is like what I charge people money to tell them, so I might as well just, this is probably going to be the most valuable stuff that I can give you. Yeah, I mean, basically good writing is important because all you've got is copy today. Like if you look at a lot of, your blog runs on the Ghost platform, doesn't it? Yeah. There's this platform called Ghost, and a lot of WordPress is going like that. And the thing about Ghost is that it's all big words and no pictures. Like I'm sure there's a technical term for that, but blogs look like this now. So you've really got nowhere to hide. If your writing's not very good, that's all we've got to focus on. So what I do is I read books, and I find stories. I'll show you how I do it. I've got this is my swipe file. Oh, you can't see it. I have this swipe file, and every time sometimes you see a cool story, and you're like, I know I'm going to forget that story. Well, I copy and paste it into here. So that one I told you about the lion, Clyde Beatty, that was from my swipe file. And the NASA thing as well, about the pen, I got that from my swipe file as well. So I'm constantly keeping stories like this. Like, there's one like, the Rolling Stones used to play Popeye the Sailor Man on stage sometimes because like the speakers were so bad no one could hear them. And the girls were screaming so loud, so it didn't matter what they played, so they had this joke. And I think there's a story about like Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones. He wrote Satisfaction in his sleep. Like he woke up one morning, there was a tape recorder next to his bed, and he pressed play, and on it was like 30 seconds of that song, and then just like half an hour of snoring. But that's how he wrote the song. So I start off my emails, my marketing emails, with like a story like that. And usually I don't know what I'm going to do next. So then I say like, it's like that in internal comms. And I go to, like when I meet people who get these emails, they go, oh, I always wonder when you're going to say, it's like that in internal comms. Like, because I have like a bridge, and then I go into like what it's like in internal comms. Like I create some kind of link between that story. And I'll show you how I do that. Does anyone have any kind of questions at this stage? A really good place to, let me get these slides back on, because I'll show you a little hidden feature in Amazon actually. There we go. Yeah, one of the popular stories I've used is there's a story about Steve Martin, the comedian, and he's performing in like a university, and he's performing to a room like this, and he's doing his stand-up gig, and it goes really well. I think it was like Vanderbilt University, but the problem he has is that he ends his stand-up gig, and like he says, thanks, goodbye, but they don't believe that the gig is over. Like, they think it's just still going, and he can't leave. There's no wings, so he has to walk through the middle. So the audience follows him out of the building, and he's like, no, the show's really over, and he tours around the campus, and he like tours around the campus, and eventually they're all following him, and he sees like an empty swimming pool, and he says, okay, everybody get into the swimming pool, and they do, and then he runs off to his car. And it's very hard to stop reading that story once you start. Storytelling is a very woolly word, but it's the best way to engage people via email. And then I go, okay, and it's like that in internal comms. And then I go, damn, how is it like that in internal comms? And I can normally find something that links to like a product I want to sell. So I say like, oh, it's like that in internal comms. Sometimes when you're working on a project, it's good to close it in a professional way. We teach the consultancy cycle on our course Accelerate. We've got 3 spots left, blah, blah, blah. So you can always find a way. So you start with, it's a bit like how John Lennon and McCartney, they used to write, you would think they would write the song. They would write like the words first, and then they'd write the melody. But in fact, it works the other way around. So like Paul McCartney wrote the lyrics to Yesterday. Like he wrote the melody for Yesterday. And he was convinced that he'd ripped it off from someone. So he went around the music industry for like 2 months saying, have you heard this song? And they're like, no. And then only afterwards did he put in the words. So it works the opposite way around to what you'd think. And writing sales emails, for me, works the opposite way around. Like I start with a good story that I will get their attention with, and then I just mix into, whatever I want to sell them. So I'll show you just a few little ways to get these stories, if you like. Would that be useful? Has anyone got any questions at this stage?
Is there a nature of the story, confusing your attempt to sell?
Sorry.
I'll just repeat, yeah. So is there a danger of confusing your pitch or your sale with the story that you're actually telling them in the email?
Is there a danger of confusing them?
Yeah.
Do you mean like, why the hell is this guy sending me all these weird stories about?
Possibly. I'm sure it works for you, but is there a danger? Maybe it doesn't work in some cases?
Yeah. Some people they've signed up for the Journal of Internal Communication, and then 2 weeks later they're getting emails about Steve Martin and James Brown, and they're like, what? I don't get it. So in a few small cases, but they can always unsubscribe from the emails. But on the flip side, we get so much positive feedback. Like, people are just like, there's that quote, like, most people lead lives of quiet desperation. You know, they don't have much interesting stuff to do at work. So stories like these really kind of, you know, it's a very engaging thing to do. Yeah, one cool thing you can do is go on Amazon, and there is, I'll just show you it live now. Anyone have a Kindle? Yeah? Yeah. Did you know there was like, on the Kindle you can highlight stuff. I'm trying to find my cursor. Yeah. On the Kindle you can highlight stuff. But you can also like see what other people have highlighted. And what people tend to highlight on the Kindle tends to be the best stuff, like the best stories, the best anecdotes. So you can actually kind of hack Amazon into giving you the best parts of any book for free without having to read the book. So, but you need Wi-Fi to do it. So what you do, I don't think I have this in the slide, you basically go onto Amazon and you go into your Kindle account. You don't need to have the Kindle. You go into the Kindle website and you click on popular highlights, and then it will let you navigate to any book. So you want to find books like about rock and roll or stuff that people find interesting. So like sporting heroes or movie stars. Biographies work really well. And you'll see that people have highlighted the best bits of the book. Like Branson's books are full of stuff like that. And you just take them, you take the best bits and you keep them in your swipe file. And that's a really good way to kind of get interesting content. Another thing, I'm sure you guys like use Quora. Any of you guys on Quora, the Q&A website? Yeah. Oh, and this is just one example. Like I shared this story about James Brown doing something at a gig, and we get this email back, and this person, remember that Rock Your Comms ebook I showed you? She downloaded that like in 2012, so 2 years ago, and she's just been through these emails every week for 2 years, and then suddenly she just wakes up one day and sends us like an email back from this like James Brown story. And she says, oh, could you have a call tomorrow? I'm interested in your services. And she turned into like a £50,000 client. And it took that long, but we waited until she was ready. And that's like the power of content marketing. It kind of buys you time. Because like if you think about someone coming to your website today, they might not be ready today. They might not have the budget. So collecting their email address and sending them interesting stories, it's just like a slow dance that kind of seduces them over time. Yeah, so Quora is a great way to get content. I'll just kind of wrap this bit up by saying, like, so I tell these stories, right? And I always found myself, okay, how is this relevant? Like, I've told them a good story, but now I need to sell them something, and I need to make it relevant to their industry. Because if you just tell random stories, after a while they'll tune out because they can get that from like the Metro or anywhere. So it's got to be relevant to their industry. So so it's still work. It feels like something professional rather than just some idiot telling them stories. And the way you do that is with a bridge. So do you remember that? Like, I've used that story about NASA loads of times. Shamelessly kind of recycle it. And the transition here was like, I love this story because it illustrates how smart people waste time. And there are so many of these bridges, and they work for anything. So like, I told a story about James Brown, and like he's up on stage one day, James Brown, at the Apollo Theater in New York, and he's dancing away, and halfway through one of his songs, he turns his back to the audience, and James Brown is still like dancing, and everybody thinks he's just part of the show. You know, it's quite a strange thing to turn your back to the audience, but he's James Brown, so who cares? But Mick Jagger's in the audience, and Mick Jagger realizes what he's doing. Like, as the band's here, and as he's going along the stage, he's kind of motioning to his singers and his musicians, and he's like, he's fining them. He's like issuing spot fines. So like, you know, you missed a beat, that's $20. Your shoes are not shine, that's like $40. So he's like, he's not even waiting until after the show to kind of reprimand them. He's doing it mid-track. So, and he was apparently he was quite famous for this. So the obvious bridge there is like, you could pick any one of these, you know. So you've got them with that story. You know, who wouldn't read that story? It's got Mick Jagger in it, it's got James Brown in it. So then you just pick one of these. Okay. Here's the point. Or what's the takeaway here? Or why am I sharing this? And it's just as simple as that. Like I used to make the mistake of really going to town on a bridge. Like I used to kind of go back and forth, really creating a watertight argument for why I'd shared that piece of content with them. And that kind of came off like a vicar giving a sermon, and it was just unnecessary. So I just kind of used one of these lines to pivot into what I actually want to talk about, having captured their attention. Any questions at this point?
So I've used that same story on my blog.
Have you?
I've heard you tell it. And I had a different...
Well, I nicked it from someone else, so that's fine.
Some of the stories I use are my own stories. I think back to my own experiences, lessons I've learned, and I'll tell a little story about what happened to me, and then I'll bridge into, well, what does that mean? And I think having content from other people and other stories is great. You've got a lot of content inside your own knowledge base. If you're a startup, problems that you've overcome, how did you overcome them? You know, it's good stuff.
Yeah. And I think asking your email list what their problems are so you can talk about them is really powerful as well. What were you going to...
No, can I just ask you, from when you started doing email marketing to now, at the beginning, were you quite sensitive about, were you worried about people unsubscribing? Like now you're not?
Every time I send an email out, it's like a torturous process because I write it in the CRM system, and then I read it, and I send myself a test email. And like I read it again and I print it out and then I go back to it and I change the intro and like I really sweat about it. Like because it goes out to like 5,000 people and I get really nervous about it because, you know, but the thing you've got to remember is you're only ever talking to one person. Like now it's quite scary because I'm talking to all these people, but I'm only ever actually talking to one person at a time. So yeah, and people, if you're not, they say if you don't get any unsubscribes, it's because you're not like selling enough stuff. You're not promoting yourself enough. So yeah, does that answer your question? Yeah. So hopefully, like, you can see the tactics. Like, the reason email is in the middle of all the channels that I do is because all this stuff, like the ebook, the journal, to be honest, people will probably lose it, or they'll delete it, or you know, it just gets swamped by their lives. But once you have their email address and you continue to send them just short, interesting stuff, very few people do that, and you'll have them for months and years. So it's very sustainable. But I couldn't have done anything of what I've done without having. Oh, so you've got a question, yeah?
Yeah, just asking. This is very much. It's great for B2B marketing, but what about consumer marketing? Is B2B marketing just consumer marketing, not done as well and 3 years out of date?
B2B marketing is much easier than consumer marketing.
Exactly. So
yeah.
Which of these techniques do you think are applicable to consumer marketing?
The thing about these techniques is they work very well if you have a high value customer. So like a customer could be worth anywhere from like £6,000 to like hundreds of thousands of pounds for us. So we're quite lucky in that respect. It probably wouldn't work if you were like if I was still in the magazine industry and I was selling magazines. A magazine costs £5. The newsagent takes half of that. So like the profit on a magazine is like £1.20. So it wouldn't be worth our while to kind of go through such an elaborate sequence for such a low when a customer has such a low a low lifetime value. I mean, what industry are you in, if you don't mind me asking?
Various. Yeah, I would say I'm closer at this point to consumer B2B. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think it's a type of chance. So if you reverse the funnel, so you're talking about getting to a very specific, narrow group of people,
Hmm.
and then closing the deal, it's almost the reverse in consumer where you're trying to get.
You're trying to get everybody, yeah. Yeah, and we're trying to get a few high-value prospects, yeah. It's different. I mean, some of the tactics will probably still work. I mean, if...
So let's be more specific. The content generation tactics, I like that sort of thing. So.
Like, creating ebooks and putting them on the Amazon Kindle is one popular way to do, like, B2C marketing, because Amazon's got a great platform and it can put you in front of people for a very specific keyword. And, you know, the tactic of crowdsourcing that ebook or that content would probably work very well. Like a trade journal, you know, in B2C, not so much, but I mean, this is just like this is a book, so it could be anything. I mean, if you were in like container gardening or like you were like selling vertical gardens or something, you could easily find the top 50 bloggers in that space and create some kind of guide by interviewing them. But the point is just that, number one, you don't create the content because that takes ages and it might not work anyway. And number two, you want something that will stand the test of time. As Ed correctly identified earlier, when we were talking, it's evergreen content. That's the other word people use for it, evergreen content, or I've heard it referred to as cornerstone content, stuff that never changes. Does that help? Is that helpful?
Yes, I think rapid content generation is key to consumer and any techniques you have for that.
The kind of the missing piece that I wanted to talk about as well is having if you're starting out and you don't have like interns or you don't have like someone to actually do all the physical contacting people on LinkedIn and, you know, building all this content for you. Like something I found really useful was like having it's called a virtual assistant. Has anyone heard of that before? Yeah. It's basically where you hire someone in the developing world, like usually in the Philippines, and you pay them either a part-time salary or a full-time salary to work for you. And it can be very cost-effective because I think the average wage in the Philippines is like, it's gone up a lot, but I think it was only like $600 a month. So if you pay someone like $700 or $800, which is what, like £550 a month, that's something that's just about sustainable for like someone working for themselves or a startup. And the thing about the Philippines is that it's like the fourth largest English-speaking language nation in the world, very educated country. I've actually got like, I think a free book on Amazon that if you search my name on Amazon, I think it's called Ethical Outsourcing. And I wrote it ages ago, so it's probably crap, but you can read it and find out how to manage people in the Philippines. Because it is really powerful, but it is also a big headache because you're like basically responsible for these people's lives. And as entrepreneurs, you know, we're kind of quite scatty and we jump from thing to thing, and now you're responsible for feeding someone's kid. So like that's something to not enter into so lightly. But for me, I could not have created all this kind of little content empire without the help of a virtual assistant. So that's something, if you take away one thing from today, I recommend that you look into. Any other thoughts?
Question about that. So how much do you help create the content? Do you come up with the idea, the structure, or how does it work?
How much input do you have to give them to create this content? Like if you're crowdsourcing content, you give them you basically give them a script to reach out to people. So you say reach out to people in this industry with this business, this job title, and ask them this question, and they'll just send you like every day you'll get in your inbox people who've replied to that.
What about content that isn't crowdsourced? Do you use them for that? And how much of that help do you give them then? For example, an ebook you're writing, an ebook.
Yeah, so the question is, could you like make an ebook and just get someone in the Philippines to write it for you? Or, yeah, I found no. People in the Philippines have really great English, and they're all university educated. So they're, I mean, I'm generalizing, but I found them to be super bright and very great to work with. But I found like they need more help than I can give them to create content like that. So that's not really something you can kind of farm out, but you can farm out the process of crowdsourcing and getting genuine experts to help you.
Have you heard of one called Fiverr.com?
Fiverr, yeah.
No, I think from the Philippines to compile a database of restaurants in London for me, 100 of them, for $5, which was like £3.8 or something.
Wow.
It came back honestly perfect
Really?
spreadsheet, yeah. Fiverr.com, and you don't pay them until you're happy with the work that they've done as well.
That's amazing. There's a guy, you know, Tim Ferriss, he wrote that book, The 4-Hour Work Week. I read that and I was like, oh my God, like I'm going to work 4 hours a week and this is going to be amazing. He talks about hiring a virtual assistant to do all the stuff for you. And I was like, so I hired this guy and I was paying him like, I don't know, $500 a month or something, which back then was okay. So he turns up on the Monday and he's like, okay, boss, because they call you boss. And hey, good sir, because they're very Christian. It's a very Christian country, so there's like deep, they talk about God a lot, and which can spook you if you're not used to that. And I realized I actually had no work for him. Like I'd not figured out what I wanted him to do. So I was like, okay, I'm going on holiday, so find out the hotels in Deauville in France. And he had so many questions, it was actually just quicker for me to do it myself. And so I really kind of, after a while, I had to end the relationship and I felt really bad. But the mistake I'd made is that I'd not had a repeatable task for him to do, because of course he's going to have questions and of course I'm going to have to train him. But like with our job site, it's adding jobs to our job site and finding people's email addresses and contacting them. It's something you can just master and be good at. So when you're hiring someone to work for you, you don't want them to have to learn new tasks all the time. You want them to have to do one thing that they do really well. But yeah, I think it's free now on Amazon, like it's called Ethical Outsourcing, the nice guy approach to something or other. Anyway, if you Google my name, you'll find it.
Sorry. Yes. We had a virtual chat earlier, and as you know, I work for a translation company. So my question is, when you get all these stories and all this content, do you find yourself sometimes confronted with the problem of, is it relevant to that other culture? Is this going to appeal as much? Is this not going to cause actual problems?
I find like gravity works everywhere. Like if you find stories about things that people find exciting all over the world, so like that's why a lot of my stories are about rock music. I'm more like into dance music. I don't know anything about rock music, but I know that they've got some good stories. So that's why I read like Steven Tyler from Aerosmith's autobiography, and I just immerse myself in that world, because if I can tell those stories, people might think that I'm kind of exciting as well, and they'll kind of, it'll rub off on me. And like, it's really interesting how you do this and people model it. Like I got this guy at Deloitte, emailed me. He's like, I've been reading your emails, and he went to my training course, and now he's got like 7,000 people at Deloitte following him, and he's telling us some story about Muhammad Ali, and I think at first he told me that people were, you can't talk like that at Deloitte. Why are you telling stories? You know, but after a while he started getting like complaints. He got complaints that he left people off the list. Like, why did I not get this email? You know, why did you not include me? So I've not found a market, I've not found an industry where people will not tune into interesting stories. Like, I'm sure if there is one, I've not found it. So. How do you know when you're kind of overdoing it, overstepping the mark? Yeah. I mean, I'm quite conservative about how I do it, so I email every Wednesday between 12 p.m. and 3 p.m. because my logic is that, this is just something I've made up, but my logic is that people are not busy on Wednesdays, and like, they are, and like, you know, between 12 and 2 p.m., you're kind of like, oh, you're like, no energy, and you're like looking at Gawker or like TechCrunch, and you're like, you want something interesting to pop up and read that's still work related. But how do you know when you're kind of overstepping the mark? I don't know, you can monitor unsubscribes, but people are very good at filtering. They're very good at being their own filter of like what is interesting to them. Because I was reading with email, like I don't read all my email. Like maybe 7 years ago, you could guarantee that if you sent someone an email, they would read it. But now people treat their inbox like Twitter. It's just like catch what you can, and it streams down the page, and once it's off, that page one, it's gone forever. So I think people just, I think it's quite hard to overstep the mark. And like I always worry about that. Like I was saying to you, every time I send an email, I just get really nervous and, am I boring? What, why are you sending this stuff anyway? Why can't you just like do normal things and like just, run adverts and stuff? But then you look at what other people do, and you look at like what other companies do, and they send these emails that are like templates, they're like flyers, and it's just me. They talk about themselves, and there's a million links in the email because you can only click one thing in an email. So you look at what other people do, and you realize, well, actually, I'm bringing them a cool story, and at the end, I might just talk about myself for a minute. So, and you're doing a good job when you get replies that say, oh, thanks for this email, I've shared it with my team. So you kind of know when you're doing it right, I think. But the other thing, like I meet my subscribers at events and conferences, and not one of them can ever remember why they get my emails. I'm like, how did you sign up for the list? And like, do you know what? I don't know. Like, they just started appearing one day. And it's because they've requested this, or they've requested like, an ebook, or they've attended a webinar, and they've just got put onto that funnel. Because if I went around the industry saying, would you like to receive an email newsletter that I send every Wednesday? I can think of nothing worse, So there is a bit of kind of subterfuge in the way they get this email, but they're always happy once they do get it.
Sorry for asking another question.
No.
Is it important to have an impressive email marketing system in place? Is it?
No.
Do you want me to repeat that?
Well, we use something called Infusionsoft, which is quite expensive, because we wanted to do all this like advanced segmentation. So if someone clicks a link, I want them on a different list. Like if someone shows interest in a training course, I want to pause the emails and send them in emails about that training course for a while, and then drop them back in. But for like 4 or 5 years, I used something called Aweber, which is like $20 a month. And it's just like super basic, and anyone can do it. And even MailChimp is like free. You could just use that. You just get, the best time to start like an email list is yesterday. So just get started.
Do you get a better response? Is it more effective for you in your campaign since you've spent on the better system?
Well, do you mean in terms of like deliverability and stuff?
Yeah.
Like, when people talk about email, like everybody says, oh, what about spam, getting in spam folders, and what about, not getting through? And people worry about the technology, but it's just not an issue in my experience. People who want to hear from you will hear from you, and if they don't hear from you, they'll let you know. So it's a bit like I've got all these friends who make music in their bedrooms. Some of them are quite good, but like, I'm like, why don't you release a track, or why don't you like play out in your band? And they're like, oh, I just need a sound card. I just need like one piece of technology, or, and they never really take action. And so I just start with something basic. I mean, you could even send it by hand, you don't even need, because the other thing is like, you'll notice in my email newsletters that I never use like an email template. I always just write it as though it's an email from me. Because like, since when did email become like something that businesses send? It's just a personal message.
So I'm an industry colleague, I guess, of Ian's, and to some extent a friend, and I'm a recipient of the email, and it's all very, very cool.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't do a lot of content marketing in my current role, but I'm always interested in learning about it. And so I'm probably not entirely up to date with the Data Protection Act, but you mentioned subterfuge, and I'm sorry to be like the devil's advocate in the room, but is there not some sense of responsibility to actually explain that once you have captured someone's email address via these various channels, that you are then going to communicate with them
forever.
in these various ways? And of course there's going to be an unsubscribe option and everything else, but I can recall when I was doing a lot of content marketing and there were changes to the Data Protection Act, a bit like the Cookies Act a little bit, 12 months ago, when we all suddenly freaked out about how our websites needed to behave and what notifications needed to exist there. There were certainly changes when I was doing content marketing about 3 years ago or 4 years ago around the DPA and how people's email data was used when we were communicating with them and the permissions around that. So how do you handle that? Because I think all of what you say is really compelling, and our kind of business, personal interaction aside, I do think he writes really, really great emails, and there's a lot of very good theory in how they're constructed, even to the extent of the shortness of the sentences and the engagement of the content. They're really, really great. But where's the permission aspect and that compliance? Is that essential? Is it important? Is it relevant? What's the deal there?
It's a good question. And people say it's a good question when they don't know the answer, to give them more time to think. No, like, the thing about when you opt in for a piece of content, you download it, it's double opt-in, so you get an email back saying, thanks for your email address. By the way, we want to check that this is your email address. Please click to verify. By the way, you'll also be added to our weekly newsletter. Hope you like it. If you don't, you can unsubscribe. So it kind of says, we tell them they're going to get it after they've put their email address in, so they can not click that verification link if they don't want to. And I've only ever had one person reply, all in caps, going like, why are you sending me all this crazy information? Like, go away, go away, go away. But like, I think like 5% of people are actually just like clinically insane anyway. So that's like a good, that's a good, the odds are in our favor. But yeah, we've not had, I think it's just being responsible, sending good stuff. Like, just with basic humanity, what you would want to receive and what you wouldn't. So just be respectful and send good content. And most stuff in your inbox does not do that. So if you treat your subscribers like a friend, then I think people won't complain.
So I'm going to wrap it up. That's right, Ian.
Yeah, sure.
Grab that. So thanks, Ian. Really interesting stories there. I first heard Ian tell some of these stories a few months ago, and I thought this was really helpful and useful to me because I blog most days, and sometimes it's difficult to think what to write about. But actually using some of Ian's tips sparked new ways of being creative and writing relevant content. Yeah.
If you sort of like thinking, oh, I'd like some of this stuff, but I don't really know what to do next. Like, I've got like a book coming out. It's going to be free. It's called like Content Empire. So, and it just explains all this stuff in kind of, in an easy to follow format. If you go to my website, ianharris.com, and you put your email address in, then I will send it to you when it comes out, and I will send you emails until you buy or until you die.
Amen to that. So stay behind for a drink. We've got the bar open. We will wrap up at some point, but there's a pub just across the road, so if you'd like to stay and chat, please do. So we're going to be running another event in about 4 or 5 weeks' time, just a bit of a sneak preview of what that's about. Our speaker is going to be a chap called Nilan Perez. He is the VP of Growth at TransferWise, which is an extremely successful London startup in the currency exchange space, money movement. And also he was previously VP of Growth at Housetrip, which is where I know him from because I used to work there a couple of years back. And so Nilan's topic is to be announced, but if you subscribe to our email list on our events page on our website, fordpartners.com, you'll be kept up to date with all the latest events. So thank you. Really appreciate everyone's attendance tonight, and thank you again to Ian.